Human nuclear fusion plumes blasted blazing holes of light through Earth's icy darkness. Scientists on the Celestia starship could only gape at the scanner readings, shocked that any life still persisted on humanity's frozen tomb after 50,000 years of ice-choked oblivion. In his lab on the Celestia's science deck, Juno stared intently at the bright spots flaring on his holoscreen, his blue betazoid skin glowing in their ghostly light. The data streaming in from the deep space probe was unequivocal. Active fusion reactors pulsed from mankind's ravaged homeworld. It was supposed to be a dead planet, scoured of life when its sun was knocked askew by a rogue world eons ago. The last Orion scouts to brave the outer reaches of Sol had found nothing but a ball of lifeless ice. Homo sapiens snuffed out by their own fragility. But now, unmistakably, artificial light and heat blazed on the Earth's dark side. As a scientist, Juno had an obligation to report this game-changing find immediately. He keyed the comm, his fingers trembling with excitement. No one would believe it. After 50 millennia, impossibly, humans lived still. The implications raced through his mind. This shock revelation would rock the Orion arm. The looming mystery of what awaited down on that desolate ice ball filled him with both anticipation and dread. One thing was certain. Juno had to convince the Celestia's Council to alter course for Earth with all haste. Time was absolutely critical. Humanity's survival, perhaps the fate of the very galaxy, hung in the balance. Juno hurried to the Celestia's council chamber, his heart pounding with anticipation. He couldn't wait to share the incredible news with the ship's leadership. As he entered the room, the council members turned to face him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to annoyance at the interruption. Admiral Zekroth, a grizzled veteran with a permanently scowling face, spoke first. "This had better be important, Juno. We were in the middle of discussing critical ship maintenance issues." Juno took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. "I assure you, Admiral, it is. I've just received data from our deep space probe indicating active fusion reactors on Earth's surface. Humans are alive down there." The room erupted into a chorus of gasps and murmurs. Councillor Rinthak, an elderly Orion with a long white beard, shook his head. "Impossible. No life could have survived the cataclysm that befell Earth. Your equipment must be malfunctioning." Juno shook his head vehemently. "I've double and triple checked the readings. They're accurate, and the energy output patterns are too controlled to be from automated power stations. There's intelligent life controlling those reactors." Admiral Zekroth snorted derisively. Preposterous. Humans were a weak, fragile species. They couldn't have lasted this long in such harsh conditions. Frustration welled up inside Juno. Why couldn't they see the magnitude of this discovery? He turned to Councillor Brixos, his longtime friend and colleague, silently pleading for support. Brixos, a tall, thin betazoid with piercing green eyes, stepped forward. "While I share your skepticism, Admiral, I believe we should investigate further before dismissing Juno's findings outright. I propose we send a stealth probe to gather more detailed scans and visual data." Admiral Zekroth's eyes narrowed, but after a long moment he nodded grudgingly. "Very well, but I'll be assigning my own team to oversee the probe's deployment and data analysis. We can't afford any mistakes or false alarms." Juno's heart sank at the Admiral's words. He had hoped to lead the investigation himself, but now he would be sidelined, forced to watch from afar as others took control of this monumental discovery. Still, at least they were taking action. One way or another, they would unravel the truth behind the mysterious lights on Earth's surface. As the council disbanded, Juno caught Brixos's eye and mouthed a silent, "Thank you." His friend nodded in acknowledgement, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Together, they would find a way to prove the existence of the impossible survivors on humanity's frozen tomb. The stakes couldn't be higher. The fate of an entire species once thought lost to the ages now rested in their hands. A week crawled by, each day feeling like an eternity to Juno as he waited for the stealth probe to reach Earth and transmit its findings. He tried to focus on his other research projects, but his mind kept drifting back to the mysterious energy readings and the tantalizing possibility of human survival. When the probe finally entered Earth's orbit and began its scans, Juno was glued to his console, his eyes darting across the incoming data streams. At first, the readings confirmed what they already knew. Active fusion reactors dotted the planet's surface, their bright signatures standing out like beacons against the cold, dark backdrop. But as the probe continued its survey, new details emerged that left Juno stunned. Infrared scans revealed a network of vast underground cities, their heat signatures snaking beneath the ice in intricate patterns. These were no mere survival bunkers, but thriving metropolises, teeming with life. The electromagnetic spectrum was equally revealing. A web of signals crisscrossed the planet, painting a picture of a global communications network far more advanced than anything the Orion arm had seen. Juno's heart raced as he decoded the transmissions, catching snippets of human voices and strange, unfamiliar languages. But the biggest shock came when the probe detected spacecraft, launching from the surface and docking with orbiting installations. Juno watched in awe as sleek, silver ships sliced through the atmosphere, their engines leaving trails of ionized gas in their wake. This was no primitive civilization, aching out a meager existence. These were the signs of a true spacefaring power. Juno leaned back in his chair, his legs shaking with the implications. He had been right all along. Humanity had survived, and not just survived, but thrived in the face of unimaginable adversity. A fierce pride swelled in his chest, mixed with a deep sense of unease. If humans had rebuilt their civilization to such heights, why had they not ventured beyond their solar system in all this time? And how had they managed to evade detection by the Orion arm's advanced sensors until now? The more Juno pondered these questions, the more he became convinced that the humans were intentionally hiding from the rest of the galaxy. But why? What secrets were they guarding so jealously? He knew he had to investigate further to unravel the mystery that had lain buried for so long. But even as excitement and curiosity coursed through him, a chill ran down Juno's spine. He had stumbled upon something monumental, a discovery that could change the course of galactic history. And with such knowledge came danger. If there were those who had kept humanity's survival hidden for so long, they would not take kindly to their secret being exposed. Juno realized he was treading on perilous ground, and he would have to proceed with the utmost caution. He took a deep breath, his mind racing with the possibilities and perils that lay ahead. One thing was certain: he could not rest until he had uncovered the truth about the impossible civilization that thrived beneath the ice of Earth. No matter the cost, he would find the answers he sought. The fate of his own people and perhaps the entire galaxy depended on it. Juno strode into the council chamber, his heart pounding with anticipation. He couldn't wait to share the incredible findings from the stealth probe. The room fell silent as he entered, the council members turning to face him with expressions ranging from curiosity to apprehension. "I have extraordinary news," Juno began, his voice trembling with excitement. "The probe has confirmed the presence of an advanced human civilization on Earth. They have vast underground cities, a global communications network, and even spacecraft capable of reaching orbit." He paused, waiting for the gasps of amazement and the flood of questions. But instead he was met with a chilling silence. The council members exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. Admiral Zekroth stood up slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Juno, this information is to be classified immediately. The probe's data will be sealed, and its existence will be known only to those in this room." Juno's mouth fell open in shock. "But Admiral, this is a momentous discovery. The galaxy has a right to know that a lost civilization has been found." Zekroth shook his head firmly. "No, Juno. The survival of humanity raises too many questions. It could upset the balance of power among the galactic races. We cannot risk destabilizing the Orion arm." Juno clenched his fists, frustration welling up inside him. "So we're just going to bury the truth, pretend that we never found them?" "That's exactly what we're going to do," Zekroth said, his voice cold and unyielding. "And you, Juno, will speak of this to no one. That's an order." Juno's shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew he couldn't defy a direct order from the Admiral. "Yes, sir," he said through gritted teeth. As the council disbanded, Juno lingered in the chamber, his mind racing. He couldn't let this discovery be buried. He had to find a way to uncover the truth behind humanity's survival. Moving quickly, Juno accessed the probe's data on his personal console. His fingers flew across the controls as he made a copy of the files, storing them on a hidden drive. Just as he finished, he heard footsteps behind him. Juno spun around to see Brixos standing in the doorway, a look of concern on his face. "Juno, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low and urgent. Juno followed Brixos out into the corridor, his heart pounding. "What is it?" he asked once they were out of earshot. Brixos glanced around nervously before speaking. "I've seen readings like this before, Juno, years ago when I was working on a deep space survey mission, but when I tried to investigate further, I was warned off by higher-ups in the galactic government." Juno's eyes widened in surprise. "What? Why would they do that?" "I don't know," Brixos admitted, "but I suspect there's a conspiracy to keep humanity's existence hidden. And if you keep digging, Juno, you could be putting yourself in danger." Juno's mind reeled with the implications. A conspiracy? But why? What could be so important about humanity's survival that someone would go to such lengths to keep it secret? He looked at Brixos, torn between his desire for the truth and his loyalty to his people. "What should I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Brixos placed a hand on Juno's shoulder, his expression grave. "For now, bide your time, gather more evidence, but be careful. Don't let anyone know what you're doing." Juno nodded slowly, his mind already racing with possibilities. He would find out the truth, whatever it takes, but he would have to be patient, and he would have to be smart. As he walked away from Brixos, Juno felt a chill run down his spine. He had stumbled onto something far bigger than he had ever imagined, and now he was caught in the middle of it, with no idea who he could trust or where the path would lead him. Weeks crawled by, but Juno's mind kept circling back to the enigma of Earth's impossible civilization. In his off-duty hours, he pored over the stealth probe's data, scouring for any hint about the humans' culture, capabilities, and intentions. Late one night cycle, Juno hunched over his console, his eyes bleary from staring at electromagnetic signal patterns for hours. He rubbed his temples, trying to massage away the dull ache building behind his eyes. As he scanned the data for the 100th time, a peculiar rhythm caught his attention. The signals pulsed in a strange, almost hypnotic cadence, concentrated around a handful of specific coordinates on Earth's surface. Juno leaned forward, his fatigue forgotten as he studied the signal's oscillating frequencies. This was no ordinary communications chatter. The pulses had a regular, repeating structure, like a code. Excitement kindled in his chest. If he could just crack the cipher, perhaps the signals would yield clues about the humans' mysterious society. Fingers flying across the console, Juno routed the signal pattern to his decryption program and set it to work unscrambling the code. As the program churned away, a sudden knock at his door nearly jolted Juno out of his chair. He turned to see Brixos hurrying into the room, a datapad clutched in his hand and a wild look in his eyes. "Juno, you need to see this," Brixos said breathlessly, thrusting the datapad into Juno's hands. "I've been digging through the galactic government's archives, and I found evidence of a cover-up going back millennia." Juno scrolled through the files on the datapad, his eyes widening with each new revelation. Brixos had unearthed records of dozens of civilizations that had detected signs of life on Earth over the centuries, just like the Celestia had, but in every case, their probes had vanished without a trace, and all data related to the discoveries had been scrubbed from official records. "Someone or something has been working to keep humanity's existence hidden," Brixos said, his voice tight with tension. "Every time a species gets close to the truth, their evidence disappears, and their investigations are shut down." Juno's mind reeled with the implications. If Brixos was right, then he had stumbled onto a conspiracy that spanned the galaxy and stretched back thousands of years. But who was behind it, and what were they trying to hide? Just then, Juno's console chimed, signaling that the decryption program had finished its work. He turned back to the screen, his heart pounding as he scanned the translated message. The text was short, but its contents sent a chill racing down his spine. "We know you're watching," the message read. "Leave us alone or face the consequences." Juno sat back in his chair, his mind spinning with the implications. In his quest for answers, he may have just initiated first contact with a species that had gone to extraordinary lengths to stay hidden, and now, it seemed, they were aware of his prying eyes. He looked up at Brixos, seeing his own shock and unease mirrored in his friend's face. They were treading on dangerous ground now, poking at secrets that powerful forces wanted kept buried. Juno knew he should heed the warning and walk away before he got in too deep. But the scientist in him rebelled against the idea. He had come too far, glimpsed too many tantalizing hints about the truth to turn back now. No matter the risks, he had to see this through to the end. Juno copied the decrypted message onto his personal drive, along with the rest of the data he had collected. If he was going to unravel this mystery, he would need to be cautious and work in secret. He couldn't trust anyone else with what he had learned, not even his closest friends and colleagues. He met Brixos's gaze, seeing the same dedication kindling in the other man's eyes. They were in this together now, two rogue scientists chasing a truth that could shake the foundations of the galaxy. Whatever awaited them on Earth, whatever dark secrets the humans were guarding, they would face it side by side. Juno took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the task ahead settling onto his shoulders. He had set out to solve a scientific puzzle, but now he found himself at the center of a conspiracy that could alter the course of history. There could be no turning back, no matter the dangers that lay ahead. He looked back at the pulsing signal on his screen. The humans' ominous message burned into his mind. They were watching, and they knew he was coming. But Juno would not be deterred. He would have his answers, even if he had to brave the frozen surface of Earth and confront the impossible survivors face to face. Juno's heart raced as he and Brixos sprinted through the Celestia's corridors, the stolen data clutched tightly in Juno's hand. They had to get to the council chamber, had to make them see the truth before it was too late. As they burst through the doors, Juno skidded to a halt, his eyes widening at the scene before him. Admiral Zekroth stood nose to nose with a towering insectoid alien, his face contorted with rage. "You have no right to be here," Zekroth bellowed, jabbing a finger at the alien's chitinous chest. "This is a Celestia matter, and we will handle it as we see fit." The alien chittered angrily, its mandibles clacking together. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Admiral. The humans are not to be trifled with. They must be contained at all costs." Juno edged closer, straining to hear over the rising voices. He caught snippets of the conversation. Containment breach, humans, highest priority. His blood ran cold. Whatever was happening on Earth, it was far bigger than he had ever imagined. Suddenly, an ear-splitting alarm tore through the chamber, and a panicked voice crackled over the intercom. "Unknown vessel detected on intercept course. All hands to battle stations." Juno and Brixos exchanged a horrified glance, then turned and ran for the bridge, their footsteps pounding against the metal deck plates. They burst onto the bridge, chest heaving, to find the crew in chaos. Officers shouted orders and warnings, their voices tight with fear. On the main view screen, a sleek black ship hurtled towards the Celestia, its hull pulsing with an eerie green light. It was unlike any vessel Juno had ever seen, all sharp angles and gleaming surfaces, with no visible engines or weapons ports. "Hail them!" Admiral Zekroth barked, gripping the arms of his command chair. The communications officer shook her head, her face pale. "No response, sir. They're not acknowledging any of our transmissions." As the black ship drew closer, a deep, menacing voice suddenly boomed over the comm system, filling the bridge with its malevolent echo. "Oh, you were warned," the voice growled, each word dripping with contempt. "Now you will face the consequences of your curiosity." Before anyone could react, the black ship opened fire. Brilliant green beams lanced out from its hull, slicing through the Celestia's shields as if they were tissue paper. The deck bucked and heaved beneath Juno's feet, throwing him and Brixos to the ground as explosions blossomed across the bridge. Juno dragged himself upright, his ears ringing, and stared in horror at the viewscreen. The black ship hung before them, its weapons glowing with an unearthly light as it prepared for another salvo. Alarms blared and sparks rained down from shattered consoles, the acrid stench of smoke filling the air. In that moment, as the lights flickered and the ship shuddered beneath the onslaught, Juno realized the true scope of the danger they faced. This was no mere hostile species. This was an enemy with technology far beyond their own, an enemy that had managed to hide an entire civilization from the rest of the galaxy for millennia. And now, with the Celestia's defenses crumbling and the crew thrown into disarray, Juno knew that their only hope of survival lay in uncovering the truth behind the humans' motives. They had to find out what the humans wanted, why they were so determined to stay hidden, and most importantly, how to stop them before it was too late. Juno hauled himself to his feet, his mind racing as he stared at the chaos erupting around him. The Celestia couldn't take much more of this punishment. They needed answers, and they needed them now. He turned to Brixos, his eyes hardening with grit. "We have to get to the bottom of this," he shouted over the blaring alarms. "We have to find out what the humans are hiding before it's too late." Brixos nodded grimly, his face streaked with soot and sweat. "But how?" he yelled back, flinching as another explosion rocked the ship. "We can't even get close to them without being blown out of the sky." Juno's mind raced, desperately searching for a solution. They needed more information, needed to understand their enemy's capabilities and weaknesses. And then, with a sudden flash of inspiration, he knew what they had to do. "The probe," he shouted, grabbing Brixos by the arm. "It's still in Earth's orbit, still gathering data. If we can tap into its feed, maybe we can find something we can use against them." Brixos' eyes widened, then narrowed with tenacity. "Let's do it," he said, his voice steely. "We can access the probe's data from the auxiliary control room. If we hurry, we might still have a chance." Together they raced from the bridge, dodging debris and sparking wires as they plunged deeper into the wounded ship. Behind them, the sounds of battle raged on, the deck shuddering beneath their feet with each new impact. But Juno barely noticed. His mind focused solely on the task ahead. They had to get to that probe data, had to find a way to unlock the humans' secrets. The fate of the Celestia, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As they sprinted through the darkened corridors, the ship groaning and shuddering around them, Juno knew that they were racing against time. The humans had already shown their hand, had already demonstrated the terrifying extent of their power. Now it was up to him and Brixos to find a way to level the playing field, to uncover the truth that had been buried for so long. And as the battle raged on above them, Juno knew that failure was not an option. They had to succeed at any expense. The fate of everything they knew and loved depended on it. Juno clung to his console as the Celestia shuddered under the relentless assault, his eyes darting across the readouts. Amidst the blaring alarms and shouts of the crew, he noticed an anomaly in the power levels. The ship's reactor output was fluctuating wildly, dropping far below the expected levels for the damage they were sustaining. His mind raced as he analyzed the data, realization dawning on him like a cold shock. The human ship wasn't just attacking them, it was draining their power, siphoning off energy from the Celestia's reactor, even as it pummeled their shields. "They're using some kind of energy absorption technology," Juno shouted over the chaos, his voice raw with urgency. "They're fueling their weapons with our own power." Admiral Zekroth spun to face him, his face grim. "Are you certain?" Juno nodded, his fingers flying across the console as he brought up the readings. "Look at these fluctuations, it's the only explanation." Zekroth's face hardened as he studied the data. Then he turned to the navigation officer. "Prepare for an emergency jump to hyperspace. We need to get out of here now." As the crew scrambled to initiate the jump sequence, the barrage from the human ship suddenly ceased. The bridge fell silent, the crew exchanging wary glances as they waited for the next move. "Admiral, they're hailing us," the communications officer reported, her voice tight with tension. Zekroth hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Put them through." The view screen flickered to life, and Juno found himself staring into a pair of piercing blue eyes, set in a face that looked as if it had been chiseled from stone. A jagged scar ran down the man's right cheek, a stark contrast to his otherwise sharp, angular features. "This is Captain Ryan Perry of the Earth Defense Fleet," the man said, his voice cold and hard. "You have violated our sovereignty and spied on our civilization. Explain yourselves." Zekroth stepped forward, his posture rigid. "Captain Perry, I am Admiral Zekroth of the Celestia. We meant no harm. We were merely curious about the status of your world and your people." Perry's eyes narrowed, his lip curling in a sneer. "Curious? Is that what you call sending probes to spy on us, to gather intelligence on our capabilities?" "I assure you we had no hostile intentions," Zekroth said, spreading his hands in a placating gesture. Perry barked a harsh laugh. "Spare me your platitudes, Admiral. We have been watching you, watching all of you for centuries. We have seen the wars, the power struggles, the petty conflicts that tear your civilizations apart, and we want no part of it." Juno's mind reeled at the implications. The humans had known about the galactic community all along, had been observing them from afar. But why stay hidden? Why not reach out, share their knowledge and technology? As if reading his thoughts, Perry leaned forward, his gaze boring into Juno's. "We have chosen isolation for a reason. Our technology, our society, our very way of life, we will not let it be corrupted by the chaos and strife that plague your kind, and we will defend our way of life by any means necessary." The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Juno stared at the empty view screen, his mind racing. The humans' isolation was no mere defensive measure, he realized. It was a deliberate strategy, a way to protect their advancements and keep them out of the hands of those who would abuse them. As the Celestia's engines thrummed to life, preparing for the jump to hyperspace, Juno couldn't shake the feeling that they had just brushed up against something far greater and more dangerous than they ever could have imagined. The humans held secrets, knowledge that could change the balance of power in the galaxy, and they were willing to go to any lengths to keep those secrets safe. The question was, what would happen now that the Celestia had stumbled upon their existence? Would the humans simply let them go, content to retreat back into their self-imposed exile, or would they see the Celestia and the galactic community it represented as a threat to be eliminated? Juno had a sinking feeling that he already knew the answer, and as the ship lurched into hyperspace, the stars blurring into streaks of light, he couldn't shake the sense that they were hurtling towards a confrontation that could alter the course of history, for better or for worse. As the Celestia limped through space, its hull scorched and battered from the human ship's onslaught, Juno stared out the viewport at the distant stars. His mind raced with questions and possibilities, the weight of the knowledge they had gained pressing down on him like a physical force. Beside him, Brixos paced the observation deck, his brow furrowed in thought. "We can't just let this go," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "The humans, their technology, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. We have to find out more." Juno nodded, his eyes still fixed on the stars. "But how? After what just happened, Zekroth will never agree to another mission to Earth." Brixos stopped pacing and turned to face Juno, a glint of drive in his eyes. "Then we'll have to convince him. We can't afford to ignore this, not when the safety of the entire galaxy could be at stake." Together they made their way to Zekroth's office, their footsteps echoing through the ship's eerily quiet corridors. The crew was still reeling from the attack, the usual buzz of activity replaced by a tense, uneasy silence. They found Zekroth hunched over his desk, his face drawn and haggard. He looked up as they entered, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. Juno stepped forward, choosing his words carefully. "Admiral, we need to talk about the humans. We can't just walk away from this." Zekroth's eyes hardened, and he shook his head. "Absolutely not. We barely survived our last encounter with them. I won't risk any more lives on a fool's errand." Brixos leaned forward, his voice urgent. "But sir, that's exactly why we need to learn more about them. Their technology, their capabilities. If we don't understand what we're up against, we could be putting the entire galactic community at risk." Juno nodded, picking up the thread. "We're not suggesting a full-scale mission, just a small, stealthy team to gather intelligence. If we can learn more about their society, their motivations, we might be able to find a way to establish peaceful contact." Zekroth's eyes flashed with anger. "Peaceful contact? After what they did to us, you're delusional." Juno held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I know it seems unlikely, but think about it. If they really wanted to destroy us, they could have done it easily. Instead, they let us go with a warning. That suggests they might be open to communication if we approach them in the right way." Brixos jumped in, his voice firm. "And even if they're not, the information we gather could be invaluable to the galactic government. It could help us maintain peace and stability in the face of this new threat." For a long moment, Zekroth was silent, his gaze distant. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, I'll authorize a small team to infiltrate Earth's solar system, but I'm sending a unit of our best operatives with you, for protection." Juno let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you, Admiral. We won't let you down." As they left Zekroth's office, Juno's mind was already racing ahead, planning the mission. He knew it would be dangerous, that they were venturing into uncharted territory, but he also knew that they had no choice. The humans held the key to a mystery that could change everything, and one way or another Juno was going to unlock it. In the days that followed, Juno and Brixos threw themselves into preparations for the mission. They pored over the probe data, looking for any clues about Earth's defenses and the best approach vectors. They studied the schematics of the stealthiest shuttles in the Celestia's hangar, debating which would be best suited for the task. And all the while, Juno couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something momentous. The humans' existence had been hidden for so long, their secrets guarded so jealously. What would they find when they finally pierced the veil? As he worked, he found his thoughts turning again and again to the message they had intercepted. "Leave us alone, or face the consequences." The words echoed in his mind, a warning and a challenge all in one. But Juno had never been one to back down from a challenge, and as he looked around at the determined faces of his team, Brixos, the operatives, the engineers and technicians who had volunteered for the mission, he knew he wasn't alone. They were all united by a common purpose, a burning need to understand the truth that had been hidden from them for so long, and whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever secrets the humans were guarding, they would face them together. As the day of the mission dawned, Juno stood in the hangar bay, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The shuttle loomed before them, sleek and silent, its black hull seeming to absorb the light around it. Beside him, Brixos clapped a hand on his shoulder, his face set in a grim smile. "Ready to make history?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Juno nodded, his eyes fixed on the shuttle. "Let's do this," he said, and together they stepped forward into the unknown. The shuttle's stealth field shimmered as it slipped through Earth's atmosphere, Juno's heart pounding as they raced toward the planet's frozen surface. Beside him, Brixos's face was etched with tension, his hands gripping the controls tightly. The elite operatives sat behind them, their expressions unreadable beneath their helmets. As they approached the coordinates of the underground city, Juno scanned the icy landscape below, looking for any sign of the humans' presence. At first, he saw nothing but an endless expanse of white, the wind whipping up flurries of snow that obscured his vision. But then, as they drew closer, he caught a glimpse of something glinting in the dim light, a metallic structure jutting out from the ice, its edges barely visible against the stark terrain. "There," he said, pointing to the screen. "That's got to be an entrance." Brixos nodded, his eyebrows furrowed as he guided the shuttle towards the structure. As they landed a short distance away, Juno felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was it, the moment they had been working towards for so long. They disembarked cautiously, their weapons at the ready as they approached the hidden entrance. Up close, Juno could see that it was a massive airlock, its reinforced doors sealed tightly against the frigid air. He glanced at Brixos, who nodded grimly before activating the door controls with a few deft keystrokes. With a hiss of pressurized air, the doors slid open, revealing a long, dimly lit tunnel stretching out before them. Juno took a deep breath before stepping inside, his boots clanging against the metal grating. The air was stale and recycled, with a faint metallic tang that set his teeth on edge. As they made their way deeper into the complex, Juno couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in a dizzying maze of corridors and chambers. But then, as they rounded a corner, they found themselves standing at the threshold of a vast cavernous space that took Juno's breath away. It was a laboratory unlike anything he had ever seen, a sprawling expanse of gleaming metal and pulsing lights, filled with equipment and machinery that defied his understanding. Towering generators hummed with barely contained power, while sleek, streamlined devices whirred and clicked in perfect synchronicity. Juno exchanged a stunned glance with Brixos, his legs shaking with the implications of what they were seeing. The humans had not just survived, they had thrived, developing technology that made the Orion's advancements look like child's play. For a moment, Juno felt a pang of envy mixed with awe, wondering what other secrets the humans had uncovered in their long isolation. But before he could fully process the magnitude of their discovery, an ear-splitting alarm tore through the air, the sound reverberating off the walls in a deafening cacophony. Juno spun around, his heart leaping into his throat as he saw a group of heavily armed soldiers pouring into the room, their weapons trained on the intruders. At their head was a familiar figure, Captain Ryan Perry, his scarred face twisted into a scowl as he surveyed the Orion team. Juno's stomach dropped as he realized the trap they had walked into. The humans had known they were coming all along. "I warned you to leave us alone," Perry growled, his voice dripping with contempt. "But you just couldn't resist poking your noses where they don't belong, could you?" Juno opened his mouth to respond, but Perry cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Save it," he snapped. "We've been watching you since the moment you entered our system. Did you really think you could infiltrate our defenses so easily?" Brixos stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Captain Perry, please," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We didn't come here as enemies. We only wanted to learn more about your people, to understand how you've survived for so long." Perry let out a harsh bark of laughter. "Understand us? You think you can just waltz in here and demand answers after everything your kind has done?" He shook his head, his eyes glinting with a cold fury. "We've seen the wars that tear your civilizations apart, the corruption that eats away at your societies from within. You may have advanced technology, but you're still driven by the same petty conflicts and power struggles that have plagued our own history." Juno felt a chill run down his spine at Perry's words. He knew the captain was right. The Orion arm was far from perfect, with its share of strife and discord. But surely there had to be a way to bridge the gap between their peoples, to find common ground, despite their differences. "Captain," he said, his voice soft but urgent, "I know our civilizations have had their share of problems, but we're not all like that. There are those among us who strive for peace, for understanding. If you'd just give us a chance—" Perry's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Juno thought he saw a flicker of hesitation in the captain's expression, but then it was gone, replaced by a steely willpower. "You want a chance," Perry said, his voice low and dangerous. "Fine. I'll give you a choice. You can either join us in our isolation, help us maintain the secrecy we've guarded for so long, or you can be imprisoned, your memories of this place erased. There is no middle ground." Juno's heart sank at the ultimatum. He knew the knowledge they had gained here could be invaluable to the Orion arm, could help them prepare for any future threats from the humans. But at the same time, he couldn't deny the humans' right to determine their own fate, to protect the way of life they had fought so hard to preserve. He glanced at Brixos, seeing the same conflict playing out on his friend's face. They had come here seeking answers, but now they were faced with an impossible choice. No matter what they decided, there would be consequences, ripples that would affect the course of galactic history. But before they could respond, a new alarm blared through the complex, the sound even more urgent than before. Perry's head snapped up, his eyes widening in surprise as he listened to a message coming through his earpiece. When he turned back to Juno and Brixos, his expression was grim, tinged with a hint of fear that sent a chill down Juno's spine. "It seems we have a new problem," Perry said, his voice tight with tension. "A Betazoid fleet has just entered our system, and they're heading straight for Earth. It looks like your people have decided to take matters into their own hands." Juno's mouth went dry at the news, his knees going weak with the implications. If the Betazoids attacked, it could mean all-out war between the humans and the Orion arm. And, caught in the middle, with no way to warn their people, Juno and Brixos would be helpless to stop it. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and Juno knew that the choices they made in the next few moments could determine the course of history for generations to come. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical burden, but he squared his jaw, ready to face whatever came next. There could be no turning back now. For better or worse, the truth about the humans' existence was about to be revealed, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The ground shook beneath Juno's feet as the first salvo of orbital strikes slammed into the Earth's surface. Alarms blared throughout the underground complex, the cacophony of shrieking klaxons mixing with the rumble of distant explosions. Captain Perry leapt into action, barking orders to his soldiers as he pulled up a holographic display of the planet. Angry red markers blossomed across the globe, each one indicating a Betazoid strike on the hidden human cities. "It's Zekroth," Perry snarled, his eyes hard as flint. "The bastard sold us out to the galactic government. They want our tech, and they're willing to wipe us out to get it." Juno staggered back, his pupils dilating with the implications. Zekroth, his commanding officer, his mentor, a traitor. It couldn't be. But the evidence was right there, written in the fire and blood raining down from the skies. Brixos gripped Juno's arm, his face ashen. "What have we done?" he whispered. "Our curiosity, our drive to uncover the truth, it led them straight to Earth." Another explosion rocked the complex, showering them with dust and debris. Perry steadied himself against a console, his fingers flying across the controls. "No time for regrets," he growled. "We need to act now, or there won't be an Earth left to save." He turned to his soldiers, his voice ringing with authority. "Initiate Omega Protocol. Activate the lunar defense grid and the asteroid platforms. We're going to show these bastards what happens when you poke a sleeping giant." The soldiers rushed to comply, their faces grim with drive. Juno watched in awe as a massive holographic display burst to life, showing the moon and the surrounding asteroids. Hundreds of hidden weapons platforms blinked into existence, their barrels swiveling to target the Betazoid fleet. "Firing in 3, 2, 1, Perry counted down, his finger hovering over the activation key. A heartbeat later, the sky above Earth erupted with light. Searing beams of energy lanced out from the moon and the asteroids, slicing through the Betazoid ships without effort. The fleet reeled under the onslaught, their hulls crumpling and shattering as the human weapons found their mark. But the victory was short-lived. As the last Betazoid ship splintered into molten debris, the Earth itself began to convulse. The energy discharge from the weapons had triggered a cataclysmic chain reaction, unleashing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on a scale unseen in millions of years. The holographic display flickered and died as the underground complex shuddered and groaned. Cracks raced along the walls, widening into gaping chasms as the Earth itself tore apart. Juno and Brixos clung to each other, their screams lost in the roar of collapsing tunnels and the hiss of escaping air. When the shaking finally subsided, an eerie silence descended on the ruined complex. Juno staggered to his feet, his ears ringing and his vision blurred. He looked around, taking in the crumpled bodies of the human soldiers, the sparking wreckage of the command center. Captain Perry lay slumped against a shattered console, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were open, and they burned with a fierce, unyielding light. We did it, he rasped, his voice barely audible over the groans of the settling rubble. We stopped them, but the cost... He trailed off, his gaze distant. Juno stumbled over to him, Brixos close behind. How many? Juno asked, his voice raw with grief. How many died in the cities? Perry shook his head, his expression bleak. Millions, he whispered. Millions of our people crushed beneath the very earth that sheltered us for so long. Brixos let out a choked sob, his shoulders shaking with the weight of their guilt. We did this, he said, his voice cracking. Our foolish quest for knowledge, our blind curiosity, it led to this slaughter. Perry reached out, gripping Brixos's hand with surprising strength. No, he said firmly, you didn't start this war. The galactic government, the Betazoids, they're the ones with blood on their hands. They're the ones who chose to attack, to destroy, rather than seek understanding. He turned to Juno, his eyes fierce. But you two, you have a choice now. You can run back to your people, back to the ones who betrayed us. Or you can stay, and help us rebuild. Help us find a way to coexist with the galaxy, on our own terms. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.